It just like big brothers the fuck out of your spine. It flips your spine on its back, kneels on its arms, and just slaps it in the face repeatedly. If you can do these, your spine, back, midsection are strong as shit. That's all that means. Kong is up live and free on the Boost Camp app. The ebook available on the website, check it out. So I was scrolling down the bathroom wall graffiti chain that is Reddit, and I came across a couple of comments that suggested that tier lists, like the one I did recently, are lazy, uninspired content and that I had run out of ideas. There are more than a dozen posts that were all echoing the same idea, that there's an inverse relationship between how much content you put out and the quality of that content. And these Redditors, being as knowledgeable about running a YouTube channel as they are about actual lifting, came to the conclusion that the daily posts I have committed to must have caused my channel to go downhill. That greedy need for clicks must be the real reason why I'm coming out with these ludicrous opinions disparaging their favorite programs. Also, something Bromley sold out to the algorithm. Something I'm bothered that 4 of the 25 videos released this month didn't interest me. Something how dare he promote his books. I'm just here for the 200 hours of free evergreen content. I don't want to know about your stupid books. Base strength, peak strength, superior deadlift, and Kong all out at empire-barbell-store.com. You're welcome. Now this is really funny because all of the early work that I gotten praised for by the same community is exactly the same as the material I'm putting out right now. It's all literally me in front of a whiteboard giving my opinions about lifting, giving my opinions about programs, squeezing in the occasional gripe or vague social commentary. The only difference now is I have a real camera, a better microphone, and a green screen. And I'm not filming in front of the bed that I sleep on in our 1-bedroom apartment while my wife telecommutes in the other room during a worldwide pandemic. The thing is that tier lists aren't supposed to be laminated reference guides for you to carry around in your wallet. They are a tool that facilitates deeper discussion. By putting things into a primitive ranking system, there's explanation, comparison, pros and cons. I can hopefully add some depth and perspective to help with the decisions you have to make as you attempt to add some size and strength before you die. So, because I like to punch down, I figured that I would take this opportunity as inspiration to mock the entire community. No, that word doesn't fit. What's a word for echo chamber of anonymous users saying yes to each other's random thoughts like they're in an improv class? I'll even settle for a descriptor of group of mediocre hobbyist lifters who have developed a strong personal identity to their participation in what is essentially a weekly online chain letter. Oh, it's just called Reddit. Okay, I guess we'll go with that. Anyways, I took this as inspiration to populate this entire week with tier lists and let you, my dear viewers, decide if there is any value to what I'm putting out or not. In fact, I think I'm going to kick it up a notch and I'm going to dedicate an entire week to our weight room's favorite online coach, Mark Ripito. I could do another video on starting strength and the Texas method. I could do a full book review of practical programming. I could talk about trap bars, fives, hip drive, and I can do it completely unironically without the exaggerated Mark Ripito accent. Mark's status as one of the most memeable figures in lifting aside, there's a ton of good information I can pull out of that corner of the closet. So it started out as just kind of a spiteful passing thought, is now turning into something I think I'm going to actually do in January. And in case you guys haven't caught on, our weight room is now my mortal enemy. I've always wanted a mortal enemy, but I always thought it would be more formidable. They were actually supportive to my channel early on, when my channel was small, when they were unaware that I might have takes that they don't agree with. But cat's out of the bag. Mommy and daddy are getting a divorce, so choose who you want to spend Christmas with. So without further ado, let's get into today's vapid, clickbaity, algorithm exploiting content. Today's tier list is dedicated to all things spinal. It's inspired by the odd lift rant I went on yesterday. I began to think a lot about risk versus reward, and if it wasn't for the low back being such a temperamental, irritable shrew of a body part, none of this discussion would need to take place. So it begs the question, how do we get the low back just stupid cock strong? Well, I have a list for that, so let's indulge. So let's start with the deadlift. Pros of a deadlift. It's accessible, it's relatively easy to master. You just need a barbell, and technique is required, but it's not a very technical lift. It connects with competition, so getting good at a deadlift is gonna set you up to do a bunch of other cool stuff. It's really fun. People nowadays seem to really like deadlifting. It gets them into lifting, gives them goals to chase, and it actually gets the back and supportive musculatures just really fucking strong. Now the cons is that it's difficult to recover from, especially when you get good. So every deadlift session is a bigger hit to systemic recovery. You need a lot more time to rest, to recover. So fitting it in with everything else, it's a little tricky. Now most of us are here to figure exactly that out. So that's not too big of an ask. Deadlifts are also a cause of a lot of the injuries to the low back, which is why there's a stigma around it. But I view the impulse to not deadlift because you're afraid of a lower back injury in the same vein that I would view somebody not driving their car because they're afraid of getting a flat. I mean, the trade-off in the grand scheme of things, it's not even close. So the verdict, I give deadlifts a solid A tier rating. I've given barbell medicine a lot of shit for their insistence that rounding doesn't matter. And for like the weird fixation on nociception, like it's the worst mortal sin you can commit because it'll scare off droves of skittish new lifters like so many baby deer. I actually agree with most of their points. Like the population that deadlifts is going to be a better, healthier, more capable population. I just maintain that you should try to do it while keeping your stomach more rigid than day old tres leches. Like any lifter who needs recovery the way they need oxygen, sleep is very important to me. So I was super excited to partner with Bare Mattress for this. As a stomach sleeper, sleeping on low quality mattresses would cause my back to droop in the middle of the night and I would routinely wake up with low back pain. But ever since Bare Mattress paired me with their firm king size hybrid elite mattress, I've been able to wake up feeling fresh. Not only am I well rested from sleeping through the night, but I can even go into my morning workouts without feeling achy or brittle. Now, Bare Mattress also has a sleep quiz that takes all of the guesswork out of finding out which mattress is appropriate for you. Don't wait till you get the mattress to figure out if it suits your sleeping position or your preferences. Take the quiz and they will match you with the perfect mattress. Bare's mattresses are also made with 3 premium foams designed to remove and push away unwanted body heat. I absolutely cook in the middle of the night and I hate being warm when I'm trying to sleep. So anything that wicks away heat and keeps me cool is absolutely a plus. The best part about all of this is that Bare delivers your mattress right to your door. With free shipping in the United States, the mattress comes rolled up in a box and is super easy to set up. I was actually able to pop it up on my shoulder and get it upstairs in one go. If it makes you nervous to buy something you haven't tried, Bare has a 120-night sleep trial. So you get 4 months to make sure that you absolutely love it. If you don't, they pick it up for you and you get a full refund. In addition to that, Bare mattresses have a lifetime warranty and they even offer financing options and flexible payment plans. No money, no problem. Thank you so much, Bare Mattress, for supporting this video. Be sure to go to baremattress.com/Alexander Bromley to save 30%. That's almost a third off your mattress using code Alexander Bromley. Next up, the Romanian Deadlift. Pros of the Romanian Deadlift. You guys know that I love me some RDLs. It has all the benefits of deadlifting and it reinforces good habits like hip hinging, maintaining posture, and it has direct carryover to the deadlift along with just about any other physical activity that you could ever aim to get good at. And it requires the use of lighter weights. So there's an added benefit to that it gives you more time to focus on technique and positioning, which is just as important a part of having a strong, healthy low back / midsection. Love RDLs, ton of benefits there. As far as the cons, there's really no big ones that I can think of. I mean, it still might lead to the odd tweak because you are still loading your spine in a bent over, disadvantaged position. But the fact of less load being used makes me think it's reasonable to assume that it's less risky, and anybody that's drilled them will tell you that it has the same benefits to your posterior, if not more, than actual full conventional deadlifts. So the verdict for RDLs, it's S tier all the way. I fucking love RDLs. You won't find a builder for your lower body that just explodes the body parts that tend to suck on modern lifters without the risk and without the trade-off while making you better at everything else. Like, stop what you're doing right now, put the phone down, go do some RDLs. Next up, we have another posterior chain staple, which I've talked about pretty extensively, good mornings. Now, the pros of a good morning, it's essentially the same benefits of RDLs. It can be used to target different areas in your back and midsection, which is kind of nice. For instance, you can use a safety bar to target your upper back more, or you can use a cambered bar to target your hips and hamstrings more. And that's all part of the low back health pie. So I like good mornings for their versatility. The cons are it's technically a bit more inaccessible. It's harder to get a handle on the exact range you should be working through and how to make it feel right. It's harder to gauge position, and it takes a lot of commitment to get over that hump before you can really get something out of them. Now, I'm also unaware of a lot of injuries happening, surprisingly enough, with good mornings, but my own final destination paranoia kicks in the middle of really heavy sets. And I can tell you that if you do get injured, that is not the fucking position you want to be in when you do. But that by itself is not a good enough reason to avoid them. Just set the safeties in and make sure you have an exit strategy for if shit goes sideways. Verdict for the good mornings is it's B tier. It's a great movement, solid movement, but for lower back strength and health specifically, I have to mark it down just a little bit because it is a little more inaccessible. So for the population at large, there's things that do the same thing but are easier to recommend. It really is just hard to prescribe to some inexperienced trainees and those who are lifting with back issues or who are coming back from back issues looking for a fix. But for those who are going to hang around long enough to actually get good at it, there's a ton of potential benefit. Next up, back extensions. You can do these 45 degree or 90 degree. Pros of the back extension. Literally anybody can do back extensions. I mean, you can get sedentary old ladies, they can do back extensions just fine. It's very easy to scale range. It's very easy to add assistance. It feels like a lift that is very safe. And it's also a gnarly glute ham developer. It's a good way to teach the hinge. It's very easy to progress load. And it's very easy to implement when you're coming back from an injury. So some of you, when you have an issue, might find that to be one of the first things you can do without pain that gets blood in, builds some confidence, gets you on the track to lifting big weights again. The cons, I would say that this is a better developer for the movers, the glutes and the hamstrings, more so than the erectors or the muscles around the spine. It will still work great, but it's not going to give you those fucking Olive Garden breadstick erectors that you're looking for. The verdict for a back extension, I'm going to call it an A tier because it is so accessible. So many people can do it. It does have benefit to your low back. The only drawback is it's not quite as effective as a low back developmental tool than some of these other heavy hitters are. So it's not quite S tier. It's not like a must if you want a bulletproof lower back. Like I said, it's great for the main movers, not so much for the supportive movers. And it's important to know that that trade-off brings risk. If something's going to target your erectors or lower back more, that means it's going to put more direct stress on that area, and that involves greater risk. That's just part of the pie. So it's not like better or worse. You just have to evaluate that trade-off. Just don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And up next, loading. Stone, sandbag, kegs. What the fuck? I didn't know this video would have strongman bullshit in it. I tricked you. Stick around, it's for your own good. The pros of loading is it's easier to find than ever before. There are strongman implements in more gyms than ever. Many of you might have accidentally joined a gym that has strongman equipment that you can use. So the accessibility is a lot higher. Fun and challenging. It's fun as shit if you've never done it before. That's why so many people get caught into it. And it carries over to any activity that uses the hips, the back. It builds endurance and basic goddamn usefulness, which all of you need more of. And it will turn your posterior into twisted fucking steel. The cons are that there's a technical inaccessibility. I don't recommend any of you guys go just start fucking around with these implements on your own. You want to find somebody to coach you or get in on some type of organized strongman event day. That's usually the best way. Or at the very least, go scour through YouTube, get some tutorials, and then go about it. It's a little harder to learn, so it takes a little bit more commitment, and it's not great for reintroduction to training after an injury. It does also bring some sense of risk to those who are vulnerable. It's at least as risky as a deadlift is, although again, I don't think that merits not doing it or avoiding it. I think the trade-off is very much worthwhile. The verdict, I gotta give loading fucking S tier status. While it is less accessible, it is worth getting down. I don't believe there is any movement that simultaneously uses so many different functions of the lower body while being this effective at creating wide sweeping growth. This is just how the human body is supposed to be used when it comes to moving things in the real world. And it's the same reason that I think squatting is such an effective tool. If my goal was to get God tier spine strength and it was between doing these or doing deadlifts, like it's no fucking contest. I would do loads. Up next, more strongman bullshit, Husafelt stone carries or any front carry. You can actually do front carries with bags and stones and kegs. In fact, those might be easier to find and use than an actual Husafelt stone that's loadable. The pros of the Husafelt stone, it keeps the upper back in midsection and your glutes and hamstrings under a ton of tension for a very long time, more than you will ever get in a traditional straight set. It's also a nasty conditioning tool. Another pro is that scaling carries where you're very upright with light weights is probably a pretty easy way for people with pre-existing issues to get back into loading their spine because you are in your strongest position. You're completely upright and you stay that way through the entire duration. So the muscles are working, but the back isn't bent over in that position. Now, again, that trade-off exists. If you're not bent over, you're not taxing the back, which means you're not going to develop the back as much. So that's a con. It's not quite as targeted. The verdict, Husafelt carries, all front carries, solid B tier movement. If you're solely focused on strengthening the low back, it doesn't have quite the directed punch that's going to get you a really strong midsection, but it definitely gets you a foot in that direction. And it does so many other things that are good that it is a worthwhile thing. I've tried in the past to get powerlifters to implement carries at the end of their workouts. You can even see videos of Louis Simmons having his guys do front carries on GPP day. It is a very valuable tool. It's easy to implement, easy to recover from, builds conditioning. Again, it makes you useful. So I recommend you take a look at them if you haven't already. Up next is Yoke. I think this is the last strongman thing I have on here. The pros of Yoke carries is that they're fun and novel, and they're contested in strongman events. So Getting good at yoke will set you up for success if that's something you want to do. Progressing yokes over a long period of time, getting really good at them, will also help you get rid of some of that pesky height that's been killing your deadlift leverages. Yokes done routinely for a long time will make you shorter. It compresses the spine with more weight than you would ever use in any gym exercise, and the pounding of your feet as you stumble forward, like, that's a thing. Guys have lost a half inch, an inch of height over years of doing it. So for you tall guys, go nuts. For you guys that are teetering on average, 5'8", 5'9", you might not want to take the risk. Now, the cons are everything. Yoke walks fucking suck. I hate yoke walks. They're the least useful strongman event. A lot of you guys commented in the last video I did critiquing odd lifts that strongman events are all odd lifts, that's what started the sport, and if I'm going to critique odd lifts, I should critique those as well. And you were absolutely right. A lot of strongman events are fucking stupid and don't give you anything in the way of general strength or ability. If I never had to do an axle clean, a tire flip, a circus dumbbell press, or a fucking yoke walk, my overall strength and ability would not be affected whatsoever. They are very much the ends and not the means of getting strong. I mean, I've spent a lot of time getting good at yoke walks. I used to be terrible at them, and I got to the point where I'm pretty damn good. And in that time, I haven't seen direct carryover to anything else that isn't a yoke walk. What I have noticed is that my ankles, knees, hips, low back absolutely fucking kill me, and I can't do other things I like that I think are useful, like running and squatting regularly, because my joints can't take the simultaneous beat down of all those things. And God help you if you have a pre-existing issue, yoke runs will make sure that you feel it. So the verdict, D tier, fuck yokes. Next up is squats, king of the lifts. If I could only do one lift ever, it's a toss-up between some squat variation or some deadlift variation. That's a fun thought experiment to have. Point is, they're both valuable. You want to keep them both in no matter what. But specifically for building a nasty, strong lower back, the pros of squatting, they're squats. That's all you need to fucking know. The cons, from this perspective, the cons of squatting, it's actually really easy to become a good squatter with a lagging low back or posterior chain. Being upright prevents the stress, I talked about this earlier, that is needed to create a really strong low back. So it's a trade-off. If it's friendlier, it's easier to get into. You might find that it's the first thing you can do when you're coming back from an injury. Deadlifting sucks, but squatting's kind of okay, so that's where you get your foot in the door. But that also means that it's not going to develop you that much. So the verdict, squatting is C tier. It's one of the least affected methods of targeting the low back and midsection on this list, but it still creates some useful stress. The biggest asset would be in somebody coming back from an injury, finding that upright movements are just easier to get into. But still, squats do so many other important things, and it does them so well that you shouldn't take them out because you saw this stupid tier list. Squats are still king. Just for getting a strong lower back, there's other things that should take priority. Now, bent rows, we're getting out there. We're getting into some other bodybuilding and developmental type movements to see what they can do to increase strength in your low back. The pros of bent rows: train the low back, strengthen the midsection, and get as wide as a fucking house. Take my money. It's easy, it's accessible, it teaches good habits. If you have a barbell, you can do them. If you're capable of supporting 45 pounds in a bent over position, you can do them. And it tricks you into training the low back, the way you trick your toddler into eating peas by hiding it in the mashed potatoes. The cons of bent rows are pretty few. It's not as targeted a stress, so it's not going to strengthen your low back as much. But the time spent bracing and bent over really does make up for that. So the verdict, I'm gonna call bent rows an S tier low back developer. I think it's legitimately one of the best upper back exercises you can do, and its effect over the rest of the body is partly why I think that. It's extremely low risk. It's one of the first things I would scale up when coming back from a tweak, and it subjects you to a really unique stress that few other things have because it has you maintain that bent over position under a load while pulling. I think if you use it just as much as a bracing exercise as you do an upper back developer, I think it's absolutely fucking great for getting a strong midsection. And don't forget, the upper back is part of that like midsection pie. So when we're talking about low back health, a stronger upper back is going to do better to maintain position, and that feeds into longevity as far as that's concerned. So it's very much relevant. Kettlebell swing. Pros of a kettlebell swing is that it is very accessible, very easy to do. Anybody can swing a kettlebell, so it's very gentle in that regards. It improves conditioning, which is great. It teaches the hinge, which is great. You can represent your identity as a member of a culty weightlifting sub-niche, which is great. Redditors that are watching this, take notes. You can always pick up kettlebells when you get kicked out of your subreddit. The cons: the weight and stress directly on the erectors and midsection isn't very high, so don't expect to get a brutally strong back from swinging away a kettlebell. The verdict for kettlebell swings is B list. It's not a great enough developer to rank very high. but it can be a damn useful tool to those coming back from injury and those who need to reinforce or even learn good bracing habits. It's a good instructional tool. It definitely has its place. Sumo Deadlift, fucking D tier. Next. Seriously though, sumo can be a pretty good developmental tool for building hip strength, but it takes everything about a deadlift that actually builds a strong low back in midsection and just cuts it the fuck out. If you need your lower back strength to actually matter in real life, how much you sumo deadlift is a really shitty means of measuring that. Now, to be fair, anything that involves holding a weight in your hands and moving it up and down is going to have some positive developmental benefit. And this actually might be an accessible option for those with chronic issues or those who are coming back, because it does take stress off the back. So it might be a way to kind of bridge the deadlift movement before full conventional deadlifts actually feel good. I have a buddy, Eric King, who pulls 700 pounds as a sub 200 pound strongman competitor, super strong, and his lower back was just blown to shit for years. He competed through bulging discs, through fractured vertebra, and there were runs he went through where he would sumo deadlift because it was the only thing that didn't cause him crippling amounts of pain, and he was able to keep his strength high until he recovered and could go back to training as normal. So in that context, I hate to say it, sumo deadlifting, it is worthwhile. It is a tool that can be used. I'll settle on C tier. It's not great specifically for low back development compared to other movements, but it is not without value. There are circumstances where you might benefit from incorporating sumos to kind of work around issues while still getting a little bit of a stimulus. Next up is the Jefferson Curl. This is like the granddaddy of snap your shit up movements. You're taking your spine and just rounding into it. You're leaning into that really vulnerable position and then adding load to it. So it makes a lot of people's toes curl. The pros of the Jefferson Curl is that it is about the most targeted thing that you can do for the low back. And you can get a lot with a little bit of weight at first. The first adaptations you're gonna make is learning how to accommodate that position, build some flexibility, and that can help with low back hygiene, it can build you some confidence, coax some flexibility. So it's a very valuable movement, very, very targeted movement to the low back. The question is it too targeted? Is that a thing? The cons, it's extreme spinal flexion with progressive weights over time. That's kind of unknown territory. Like, we don't have a ton of data or even a ton of like anecdotal stuff with that. It's just completely new territory. Heavy Jeffersons do make me cringe, and that might be irrational fear from my previous injuries and lack of information on it, or it might be a reasonable fear from decades of paying attention. I don't know. So I can't really say anything conclusively. The verdict, I'm going to call Jefferson curls an A tier exercise, assuming we're using it as a lighter, manageable movement. I think it can absolutely help with some back issues and teach you to accommodate and be resilient in ranges where you might not have been previously. Heavy, I can't comment. I can't comment on heavy Jefferson curls. I just don't have enough experience on this movement. If there was a Jefferson Curl Olympics, would more people get injured trying to push the envelope, or would they have the strongest backs around? Who the hell knows? But I do like it as a developmental tool. Just right now, I'm not sure anybody should be trying to chase a 5-plate Jefferson curl. Next up is the McGill 3, which involves the side plank, the McGill curl up, and the bird dog. Now, McGill, the world-renowned spine specialist who wrote Gift of Injury with Brian Carroll, along with Back Mechanic, both invaluable resources I strongly recommend you guys pick up if you're having issues with that area. McGill's whole philosophy is that the purpose of these muscles is to limit spinal movement. Their job is to create restriction to keep the spine in a rigid, strong position, and that a lot of flexion and extension and movement actually works against spine health. Now, I know his methods have been integral to a lot of people coming back. There's some debate as to whether or not it's just doing any movement proactively is going to get you back on the right track, or if there's something special about his methods. I know that once I started looking at my spine that way, I was infinitely better on things like deadlifts, where I had to maintain a strong posture under an immense load. Once I started training my abdominals to do that specifically, my deadlift got better. Is that required for universal back health? I'm not entirely sure. So there's a bit of discrepancy there. Now, the McGill 3 works specifically to that end. Everything goes out of its way to limit spinal movements. That can be really good for those who do have bulging or herniated discs that might be lit up with a lot of movement, a lot of flexion and extension in the spine. Another pro is that it might be less degenerative if you believe what Stu McGill says. It's great for teaching bracing ability, carries over to a ton of movements, like I said. Cons, not a huge stress on the musculature. So you're not going to get a bunch of growth. It's like a learning tool to teach you how to make use of this stuff and then to build endurance before you then start adding load. So the verdict, I give the McGill 3 a solid B tier ranking. I think each of them are a fantastic learning tool for those who need to figure out how to use their abs or those who are coming back from an injury and aren't quite ready to get right under a load. But once you've learned how to brace and build a lot of endurance in that position, loaded work is going to make your back really strong. So it doesn't rank quite as high as you might be inclined to think. Very useful, but again, not the thing that's going to drive the point home. Now we got squat variations, front loaded squat variations, Zercher squats, goblet squats, front squats. The pros of these movements is that they're easiest for anyone to do. They're much easier to teach and for people to learn than a barbell back squat. It's easy to maintain a neutral spine by virtue of the weight being in front of you. It's kind of like when you grab a post and squat down, the counterbalance makes it easier for you to stay upright, maintain position. And that's especially going to be great for people who do have a pre-existing issue that they're trying to rehab or trying to work around. And these movements usually hit the abs really, really fucking hard. If you've never done front squats or Zercher squats, do them, put out some effort, and do them without a belt. Your abs are going to be sore for a few days. The cons of these movements, especially the Zerchers and the front squats, they're demanding physically, so it makes them trickier to wedge in to a more specific strength program. Things have to be kind of rearranged to accommodate them. And it's also not as targeted. So it's a lot of work to fit them in for what might be some secondary benefit. The verdict, these are solid A tier exercises. Now, while they're not quite as targeted, they do hammer the abdominals. If you can get away with a big Zercher or a big front squat, you have a strong midsection. You have a good ability to maintain a neutral, rigid spine under a load. So they're a good indicator as to how strong those muscles actually are and the fact that they are accessible. They can be applied to a wide variety of people. I really, really like these types of movements. So if you're looking for a stable of exercises to kind of get your toe back in the water, I strongly recommend putting a weight in front of you and then squatting down for reps. Reverse hypers. This has been a controversial topic in the past. There have been hit pieces done on the reverse hyper. I was actually part of that group that hated reverse hypers. I thought it was trendy West Side garbage and that people have been getting strong for years without this nonsense. So let's break it down. The pros of a reverse hyper, I mean, they're in every gym now, so getting your hands on one is super easy. And it's one of the most targeted erector movements you can do. If you've never done one, there are very few things that put your erectors through a stretch shortening cycle the way a reverse hyper does. And the benefit is it does it without loading the spine. So that's kind of a cool thing that might help some people in dire circumstances get their toe in the water with lifting again. Does it compound the stress of all the other lifting you're doing as well? Lifters also seem generally to enjoy it as a method of prehab and rehab. There's a lot more people saying I love reverse hypers than there are people saying, oh, I did reverse hypers and it fucked me up. Now the cons, there's some controversy as to whether it hurts or helps the back. If you believe McGill's positioning that any flexion or extension in the spine kind of wears away at the laminate and it degenerates the spine, whether it's loaded or not, then you might see this as a way of accelerating that process. Personally, I think it's a worthwhile concern, but I think McGill's approach and his stance on the reverse hyper might be overly careful. The verdict for the reverse hyper, and this is a 180 flip. This might surprise you guys. I'm gonna put this as an S tier low back movement. I've talked shit about it in the past, but it actually turned out to be integral to making my back stronger than it ever was and healthier and pain-free. It usually makes the lifter feel better just by virtue of getting movement and flushing blood in, which has value by itself, but it actually builds the erectors in the most targeted way of just about anything on this list. Some of the bigger developmental stuff, like just deadlifting, that's an isometric contraction. So it's good, and that's how the erectors are going to be used. But this puts it through a stretch shortening cycle while coaxing flexibility and mobility. And I haven't seen it create or worsen injuries with regular use. And I'm inclined to rely on that more than I am to rely on McGill studies with cadaver tissue. I still love McGill though. So yeah, if you want just a brutally strong low back and you have access to a reverse hyper, get on it. I actually like doing it before my work. I'll do sets of 15 and 20 to get a pump in. I'll progress weight carefully. It took a couple weeks before I was able to clip it off without getting a vicious back pump. And by the time that was the case, I had seen visible growth in that area. I was actually able to handle the work without getting overly pumped. It was conditioned to it. It was adapted to it. So I'm a big fan now. I am a convert. I hate to say it. Lastly on this list, I had never seen this nonsense done before, but in putting together the odd lift video that I put out yesterday, watching Atlas Power Shrug use his freak mobility demonstrating his insane, odd strength ability, shirtless and in barbell apparel jeans. He did this exercise quaintly referred to as monkey fuckers. And when you see the exercise done, you realize that that description fits perfectly. It's essentially the start of a Zercher deadlift where you're bent over, elbows hooked all the way under the bar, which by itself requires huge amounts of flexibility. He does it to a deficit, and he mainly does the first part of the movement where you push the knees back repeatedly. So it's like a hamstring stretch where you're just pumping the knees, flossing them back through that stretch. So it looks like the worst parts of like a Zercher movement, a deficit deadlift, and a Jefferson curl mashed together. Like it's just designed to make physios just cry at night. Now the pros of the monkey fuckers, super duper fucking targeted. It just like big brothers the fuck out of your spine. It flips your spine on its back, kneels on its arms, and just slaps it in the face repeatedly. If you can do these, your spine back midsection are strong as shit. That's all that means. And Atlas Power Shrug, perfect example of that. The cons are it's very, very inaccessible to most people, requires a lot of training to even be able to flirt with the movement, requires a ton of flexibility, and the load with deep spinal flexion, as I've said before, it's just completely fucking unknown. The verdict for the monkey fuckers, this is a weird one, I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna call it A tier if you can do it. I'm not gonna put it as S tier because it certainly isn't necessary and it might come with risk. Well, it might be necessary if you're Atlas Power Shrugs and like your whole game is just deep spinal flexion with a shit ton of weight. And it's likely damn effective for doing that. To anybody who can't do it, I would call it C tier just because gaining the ability by itself is such a long way around to getting a strong, healthy, rigid lower back. So I thought that was a fun one. I'm fully expecting like half the people that made it through this point in this extra long tier list video to go try their hand at monkey fuckers just to see, because you're all children with ADHD and you can't help but try the new shiny thing you saw. So if you're gonna bother doing it, let me know how it goes. I wanna know how fucking hard it was. I wanna know how uncomfortable it was. I wanna know if it fucked your back up and put you out of commission for a month. So that's all I got. This is day one of the season of tier lists. If you have ideas for tier lists, leave it in the comments. I got a few good things lined up, but I'm always open to new ideas. If you haven't already, check out my Patreon. That's where I upload my training daily with commentary, so you can see how I put these principles into action in real time. Thank you so much, guys, for your support. Everybody who's hit the subscribe button, everybody who actually watches my channel on a regular basis, your support and feedback is immensely appreciated. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.